When a humble waitress dares to warn a billionaire chasing success, her simple words spark a change that transforms not just his empire, but his entire heart. Maria pushed open the swinging kitchen door with one hand, while balancing a tray full of steaming plates in the other.
The breakfast rush had ended, but the diner was still buzzing.
Coffee cups clinked against saucers, and the low hum of conversations floated through the air. Outside, the sky was dull and gray, hinting that rain might come later. Inside, the lights were warm, the smell of pancakes and bacon filled the air. And Maria kept moving. She'd been working at Jack's diner for over 5 years. It wasn't fancy. The wallpaper was peeling in places. The booths had scratches and torn corners, and the jukebox in the corner hadn't worked since last winter. But people loved the food, and they loved Maria. She greeted every regular by name, remembered who liked their coffee black and who wanted extra syrup. No matter how tired she was, she smiled. No matter how little she earned, she treated people like they mattered. Maria lived alone in a small apartment 2 streets away. Her father had passed away 2 years ago after a long illness, and she had left college to take care of him. She never went back. Life had become all about paying rent, keeping the electricity on, and helping her younger sister with school expenses. Maria's dreams were put on hold. She didn't complain. She had learned how to make peace with her routine, how to find little joys in morning sunlight, in a stranger's smile, or in the quiet moments after the rush. That day it started like most others. She had arrived at the diner just before sunrise, tying her apron as she walked in. She brewed the first pot of coffee, wiped the tables, and took orders from sleepy truck drivers and old-timers who came every morning. She moved with rhythm, like someone who had done this 1,000 times. Around 2 in the afternoon, the front door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. A man stepped inside, brushing off raindrops from his dark coat. He looked around, as if surprised by the diner's old-fashioned charm. He was tall, clean-shaven, wearing a black suit and expensive shoes. Everything about him screamed money: his watch, his phone, the way he carried himself. He looked completely out of place. Maria approached with a smile, holding a menu. "Welcome." "Just one?" The man nodded. "Yes. Somewhere quiet, please." She led him to a booth by the window. It wasn't much quieter than the others, but it gave him a view of the gray road and the mountains beyond. He sat down, pulled out his phone, and started typing quickly. He didn't glance at the menu. Maria stood patiently. "Can I get you something to drink while you look?" He didn't look up. "Just water. No lemon." She nodded and walked away. From the kitchen, she watched him. Something about him seemed tense. His jaw was tight and his fingers tapped rapidly against his phone screen. He wasn't just a rich man passing through. He looked like someone trying to solve a problem he couldn't control. When she returned with his water, he was still staring. At his phone, he didn't even say thank you. Maria set the glass down gently. "Ready to order?" He glanced up briefly, then looked back at the menu. "Just eggs, scrambled, no toast." Maria nodded again, coming right up. She passed the order to the cook, then took more orders from other tables. As she worked, she noticed the man taking short, sharp conversations with someone on the other end. He sounded frustrated. Once he even said, "If this deal doesn't close today, we're done." "Another time," he muttered. "I don't care if they pull out." I said, "Finalize it." Most customers came in, ate their food, and left. But this man barely touched his eggs. He pushed them around with his fork, sighed often, and kept checking his watch. Outside, the clouds had darkened and the mountains disappeared behind mist. After finishing with the lunch tables, Maria walked back to the man's booth. His plate was still almost full. "Was everything all right?" she asked gently. He looked up, surprised that someone was asking. "Oh yeah, fine. You hardly ate," she said. "Not hungry." She gave a small smile. "Tough day," he gave a short laugh. You could say that. Maria didn't pry, but something in his voice didn't match his clothes. He sounded tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from staying up too late, but the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. She was about to walk away when he asked, "Do you like working here?" Maria paused. It wasn't a question she got often. "I like people," she said. "I like making someone's day a little easier, even if it's just with hot coffee and a smile." He looked at her closely for the first time. She didn't have expensive makeup or jewelry. Her hands were a little dry from washing dishes, and her apron had a tiny ketchup stain. But her eyes were kind. When she smiled, it felt honest. "Could do more," he said. "You seem ... smart." Maria chuckled. "I was in college. Studying education. Had to leave when my dad got sick. Never got the chance to go back. Why not?" She shrugged. "Life, rent, bills, helping my sister. You know?" He didn't know. Not really. But he nodded. Maria tilted her head slightly. "You don't seem very happy either." "No offense." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm just busy. Busy is okay," she said. "But being busy and miserable at the same time, that's dangerous." He looked out the window. The rain had started to fall harder. "Sometimes," she added gently, "chasing the big winds blinds us to what really matters." The words hung in the air. The man didn't reply. He looked down at his phone again, then placed it face down on the table. "Is that your advice for today?" he asked, smiling. Maria laughed. "Not advice, just something I've learned. Take it or leave it." He stared at her for a moment, as if unsure whether to feel annoyed or impressed. "What's your name?" he asked Maria. He nodded. "Thanks, Maria." She refilled his water, then moved on to help other tables. He sat there a few minutes longer, watching the rain and thinking. When he finally stood up, he left a few bills on the table far. More than the cost of the meal? Maria noticed, but didn't run after him. She simply picked up the money, folded it into her pocket, and whispered, "Thank you." The man stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. His car, a black luxury sedan, waited by the curb. As he drove off, he glanced at the diner in the rearview mirror. He didn't know why, but something about that waitress's words stayed with him. Maria didn't know who he was. She didn't know that Charles Remington was one of the richest men in the country. She didn't know that he had come to this small town to finalize a multi-billion-dollar deal. She didn't know that the simple words she spoken, without agenda, without knowing the full picture, were about to change everything. To her, it was just another day. Just another stranger with tired eyes and too much stress. But to Charles, something had shifted. Later that night, after the diner closed and Maria walked home in the rain, she thought briefly about the man in the suit. She wondered what kind. A business made a person so restless, so nervous. But then she shook her head, made herself a cup of tea, and sat by the window to read an old book. Life was hard, yes, but peace could still be found in small places and far away. In a hotel suite with a city skyline outside the window, Charles Remington stared at the wall, remembering the words of a humble waitress in a quiet mountain town. Words that had no reason to stay in his head, but somehow they did. The rain had not stopped by the time Charles Remington reached his hotel. Water streaked down the tall windows of his suite as the city lights glowed behind them. He stood there in silence, staring out at the blurry reflections on the glass. The meeting he had come to Colorado for was scheduled early the next morning, and everything was ready. His assistants had confirmed the flight of the investors. The paperwork was completed, and the lawyers were on standby. But something felt off. Not about the deal. About him. He took off his coat, threw it on the chair, and loosened his tie. His phone buzzed with messages, emails, and updates, but he didn't check them right away. Instead, he sat down on the edge of the bed and replayed the scene at the diner in his mind, the small-town restaurant, the smell of coffee, the quiet music in the background, and the woman who had spoken to him like he was just another man trying to figure life out. Sometimes. Chasing the big winds blinds us to what really matters, her words echoed again. He laughed to himself softly. Who was she really? Just a waitress with no idea who she'd been talking to. She had served him eggs, poured him water, and said something that now felt impossible to forget. Why was it bothering him? He had heard lectures from CEOs, economists, and business strategists. None of them had shaken him like that short conversation. He picked up his phone and stared at the screen. More than 50 unread emails. One from his assistant, another from his lawyer, 3 from the board of directors, and even a video message from a reporter asking for a quote. He scrolled, read a few lines, and then set the phone down again. His head was too full, he felt. Like a machine, constantly moving, constantly building. But no longer remembering why he was doing it all. He ordered dinner, but hardly touched it when it came. He kept hearing Maria's voice, calm and honest. She hadn't tried to impress him. She hadn't tried to sell him anything. She just spoke the truth, from one human being to another, at midnight. While the city was falling asleep, Charles finally got up and pulled a thick folder from his suitcase. Inside were the final documents for the merger, the one he had worked on 4 months. This merger would double the size of his company and push out dozens of smaller competitors. Most of those competitors were small-town businesses, family-run diners, old bookstores, or mom-bop shops that couldn't keep up with the digital age. He had always told himself it was just business, nothing personal. Strong survived. The weak adapted or disappeared. That was how the world worked, but now he wasn't so sure. The next morning, he dressed sharply, just like always. He put on his expensive watch, combed his hair back neatly, and stepped into the black car waiting outside. His assistant sat beside him, listing the schedule for the day. Your 10 o'clock with the investors is at the downtown office. The press conference is set for 2 o'clock. We've got a small dinner meeting planned at 6 o'clock, but it's optional if you're tired. Charles nodded, but his mind wasn't there. He was thinking about how Maria had looked at him, not with admiration, not with fear, just curiosity and honesty. She had seen something in him that he had forgotten existed. As the car pulled away from the hotel, he made a sudden decision. Cancel the dinner. Postpone the press conference, he said. The assistant blinked. Sir, we've already notified the press. I said postpone it. Yes, sir. He tapped his fingers against the car door, then turned to look out at the road. The town was small, and the buildings passed by. Quickly pharmacies, gas stations, schools, nothing flashy. Just people trying to live. 10 minutes later, Charles gave another sudden instruction. Change direction. Take me to the diner. His assistant looked confused. The diner from yesterday? Charles nodded. Yes, but ... why? What? You have meetings, push them back an hour. They turned the car around and headed toward the old diner on the edge of town. It was nearly empty when they arrived. A couple of farmers were drinking coffee in a corner booth, and a young mother was feeding her toddler at the counter. Maria was at the far end, wiping a table. She looked up as the door opened and froze for just a second when she saw who it was. Charles walked in, alone this time. No suit jacket, no phone in his hand. Maria smiled politely. Back again. He smiled too, more genuinely this time. I was in the neighborhood. She led him to the same booth as before. Water? No lemon? She asked. Actually, coffee? Today, he said. She nodded and walked away. When she returned, she set the cup down and sat across from him, uninvited but not unwelcome. Something on your mind? She asked. He took a deep breath. Do you always speak that honestly to strangers? Speak the way I'd want someone to speak to me. He nodded slowly. Well, it worked. I couldn't sleep last night. She laughed gently. That wasn't my goal. No, but it got me thinking about what I do, about the people my work affects. I've spent years building a company that eats other companies. I've told myself it's about progress, innovation, growth, and maybe it is, Maria said softly. But what if it's also about fear, he asked. Fear of slowing down? Fear of becoming irrelevant? Even know anymore. Maria sipped her own coffee. That's the thing with speed. You move so fast, you forget to look around. Sometimes you don't notice what you're breaking along the way. He nodded again. The words hurt, but only because they felt true. Supposed to sign a deal today? It'll make a lot of people rich, but it'll also crush a lot of small businesses. Diner owners, bookstores, people who remind me of this place. Maria didn't say anything. She let him sit with the thought. I haven't had a real conversation in weeks, he said. Everyone I meet wants something from me. Money, power, influence. What do you want? She asked quietly. He looked at her, really looked. Think. I want to feel human again. They sat in silence for a few moments. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were still heavy, but light was breaking through. Maria stood. I have to get back to work. Charles nodded. Thank you again. She gave a small smile. Whatever you decide today, ... Just remember, some things are worth more than profit. He watched her walk away and felt something in his chest, loosen like a knot that had been tightening for years. When he returned to his meetings, his team noticed the change. He was quiet, thoughtful, not angry, not rushed. At the meeting table, as the investors presented the final documents for the merger, he held up a hand before signing. Let's talk about something first, he said. They all looked confused. Want to understand the real-world effects of this merger? Want to know how many small businesses will shut down? Want to see the full picture? One of the executives spoke up. With respect, Charles, this deal is already months in. We've done our due diligence. I'm not talking about profit charts, Charles interrupted. I'm talking about people. Show me how this affects them. No one had ever heard him speak that way before. His team exchanged nervous glances. If this merger destroys hundreds of livelihoods, Charles continued, then maybe we need to rethink it. Maybe progress isn't worth it if we lose our humanity along the way. There was silence in the room. It wasn't just a delay. It was a shift. A powerful, unexpected turn from a man known for cutting deals with sharp precision. But today, he wasn't a machine. It was a man who had listened to a waitress, a man who had looked in the mirror and seen someone he didn't want to become. By evening, Charles had postponed the signing indefinitely. News leaked quickly. Reporters were confused. Analysts speculated. Stocks dipped, but Charles didn't care. He sat in his hotel room once more, watching the same window, but with a different feeling in his chest. Somewhere out there in a quiet diner at the edge of a small town, a woman had reminded him what it meant to live with heart, and that reminder, gentle, unexpected, and deeply real, was now changing everything. Charles sat in the back seat of the car, his phone silent in his hand, the road quietly stretching in front of him. He wasn't speaking. His assistant, who was sitting beside him, kept checking the time, clearly unsure what to say. No one was. Used to this version of Charles Remington. The man who always had a plan, who was always 5 steps ahead, was now ... quiet. The car passed through the small town again, the same town where he had met Maria. It looked like any other American town, the kind of place most billionaires would ignore. But something about this place had held him longer than he expected. He told the driver to slow down as they passed the diner. Through the window, he saw Maria talking to a family at a booth. She looked exactly the same. Same ponytail, same apron, same calm smile. He didn't stop the car. Not this time. But something inside him felt different. Something had started to grow. He didn't know what it was yet, but it wasn't going away. Back in the city, Charles went through his routine. Meetings, calls, emails. But it didn't feel the same anymore. For years, his life had been about numbers, targets, profits, shares, growth. Every minute was scheduled. Every hour was measured. But now, all of that felt like noise. He found himself thinking about Maria more than he expected. He remembered how she spoke, how her eyes never looked down, even when she was talking. To a billionaire. She hadn't tried to flatter him. She hadn't asked for anything. She had just spoken the truth. And the truth had pierced through his carefully built armor like nothing else ever had. Late one night, he called his lawyer. Send me a report. On the businesses affected by the merger, he said. Charles, are you serious? You already signed off, I said, send it. The next morning, the report arrived cold, detailed, full of numbers and graphs. But Charles didn't look at the numbers first. He looked at the list of names. Small stores, cafes, mechanics, bakeries, diners, places that were being quietly wiped out by the new expansion, places just like Maria's. He closed the report and sat back in his chair. For the first time, he saw his empire differently. Not as a powerful structure he had built with hard work and genius, but as a storm that left destruction behind. He flew back to his main office the next day. His staff noticed the change in him. He wasn't angry, but he was firm. He asked questions no one had expected. Instead of asking, "How much will we gain?" he started asking, "Who will this hurt?" He called a meeting with the board. Directors came in with papers and numbers ready to defend their strategies. Charles wasn't interested in more numbers. He stood at the head of the long table and looked each one of them in the eye. "I know we're growing fast," he said. "I know we're leading in tech, in innovation. But growth without soul is just destruction in disguise." One of the board members raised an eyebrow. "Charles, is this about the diner again?" Charles smiled slightly. "Yes, in a way. Because it's not just about a diner. It's about people. Real people. We can't forget them, not if we want to build something that lasts." There was silence in the room. Another director tried to challenge him. "We've made billions. You've built something extraordinary." "And yet," Charles said, "I feel emptier than I've ever felt." Remember? One had a response for that. After the meeting, Charles made a bold decision. He announced a pause on the merger. He sent out a message to all employees and partners. "We are reevaluating our expansion plan. Future is not just about money, it's about meaning." The media went wild. Some praised him, others mocked him. Shareholders panicked. Charles didn't care. For once he was listening to his own voice, and it sounded more human than it had in years. Days turned into weeks. And still, he thought about Maria. Not because she had done something magical, but because she had reminded him of something real, something he had forgotten in all the chaos of success. He decided to go back. One early morning, with no announcement, no bodyguards, no press, he drove back to the small town. This time, he came in jeans and a plain shirt. He parked the car a little distance from the diner and walked the rest of the way. The sky was cloudy but calm. When he opened the door, the bell rang above him. The place was half full. Maria was serving coffee at the counter. She looked up and froze again. He smiled and gave a small wave. She walked over slowly, unsure what to expect. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "I didn't think I'd come back," he said, "but I needed to." She didn't say anything, so he continued. "You said something that day about how being busy and miserable at the same time is dangerous. I've been thinking about that a lot." Maria folded her arms. He thought about it honestly. Peace, maybe ... purpose. She tilted her head. "You think you'll find it here?" "I think I'll find the truth here," he said. "Or at least, I'll remember what it looks like." Maria looked at him for a long moment, then motioned toward an empty booth. "Sit, coffee." He nodded. "Please." As she poured the coffee, other customers watched quietly. Some recognized him now. Others just wondered why a stranger looked so serious over a simple cup of coffee. Maria sat down across from him again. "So, what now?" Leaned forward. "Tell me about your life." Maria blinked. "Why?" "Because I want to understand, not just you people like you. People I've ignored for too long." She hesitated, then began. She told him about her father, about leaving school, about working 3 jobs to help her sister go to college. She talked about the bills, the sleepless nights, and the small wins, like saving enough for a new pair of shoes or having 10 minutes to drink tea by the window. Charles listened without interrupting. Every word she spoke felt like a lesson. "You work so hard," he said softly when she paused, "and no one notices." "I'm not doing it to be noticed," Maria replied. "I'm doing it because someone has to." He nodded. "Still, you deserve more." Maria smiled gently. "A lot of people do." He looked out the window, thinking. "Do you ever want to go back to school?" he asked. "All the time," she said. "But it's not in the cards right now." "What if it could be?" he said, turning back to her. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" What if I helped? A scholarship? No strings?" "Just because I believe in what you're doing, and I think the world needs more people like you. Maria stared at him, surprised. You do that? I want to, he said honestly. And not just that, I want to do something bigger. I've been working on a new idea, a way to help small businesses go digital. Build online menus, take mobile payments, connect with customers through apps. But simple, affordable, made for places like this diner. Her eyes widened. Really?
Yes.
And I want you to be part of it, not just as a user, but as a partner. I want your voice in it, your experience. Maria laughed in disbelief. I'm just a waitress, Charles said, shaking his head. You're someone who sees clearly. That's rare. She sat back, speechless for a moment. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll think about it. She nodded slowly. Okay, I will. Charles stood. Thank you, Maria, for reminding me what matters. As he walked out, she watched him through the window. He wasn't just a billionaire anymore. He was a man trying to change. And that made all the difference. Back in his car, Charles felt something he hadn't felt in years: lightness. It's not because everything was fixed, but because he had finally taken the first real step toward something better. Sometimes all it takes is one quiet voice, one honest heart, to awaken something powerful in someone else. And Maria, without even meaning to, had done just that. Charles Remington sat in his private office high above the city, but this time he wasn't looking at the skyline. He wasn't checking the latest stock numbers or reading reports. Instead, he was holding a photograph. It was taken by one of his staff during a quiet visit to that small diner, a photo of Maria pouring coffee for an elderly man, smiling like she always did, with warmth and care. He had kept that photo as a reminder, and now it sat on his desk. It's more meaningful than any award he had ever received. It had been 2 weeks since his last visit to the town. Since then, things had moved quickly. After talking with Maria, Charles had returned to his company with a fire inside him. Not the usual fire of ambition and conquest, but something different, something more thoughtful. He began meeting with his tech team, his marketing staff, and even his finance advisors to pitch a new idea. He wanted to build a system that helped small local businesses thrive instead of pushing them aside. At first, everyone was confused. They were used to big launches, major partnerships, and fast returns. But now Charles was talking about small diners, local grocery shops, and corner bookstores. People raised questions. Investors frowned. Executives whispered. Was Charles having a crisis? Was he becoming too emotional? Had he lost the edge that made him a billionaire? But Charles didn't care. He stood in front of a whiteboard with drawings and notes written in black marker. In the center were 2 big words: Root Connect Project. It was the name he gave to his new mission to create a simple, affordable platform for small businesses to go digital without losing their soul. No ads, no upselling, just real tools for real people. He made a rule: if a business couldn't afford it, they would get it free for the first year. He didn't want profits at first, he wanted trust. His advisors warned him that it would cost the company millions up front. But Charles was firm. We've made billions stepping on others, he said in a meeting. It's time we help them stand again. While all of this was happening, Charles stayed in touch with Maria. He called her once or twice a week, not to talk business, but to ask questions, to learn. She told him about the daily struggles of running a diner, what it meant when a coffee machine broke, how hard it was to update a menu, how people in her town still didn't use apps much. Her stories became the foundation of his design. One afternoon, he called her with excitement in his voice. I want you to test the first version of Root Connect, he said. Me, she asked, surprised. Double quotes. Yes, you'll be the first. Down himself with a small team and installed the software at the diner. It was basic, but easy to use. Maria could now take online orders, send digital receipts, and update her menu from her phone. Her face lit up with curiosity as she clicked through the buttons. It's simple, she said. I like it. That's the point, Charles smiled. The customers were impressed too. One truck driver said, Never thought I'd order a meatloaf sandwich on an app in this town. Word spread quickly. Other small businesses in the area heard about the new system and asked for it. Charles and his team helped them install it too. Small bookstore, a bakery, even a gas station. Everyone wanted in. Every time Charles returned to that town, it wasn't just the billionaire anymore, he was becoming a familiar face. But as the project grew, so did the pressure. Some board members were growing impatient. They didn't like the idea of giving away technology for free. One investor even said, "Charles, we didn't sign up to save the world. We signed up to grow returns." Charles stood in the middle of the boardroom, calm but determined. "You're right," he said. "You signed up to make money. But I signed up to build something that matters. I still believe we can do both, just not at the cost of people's lives." Another executive raised his hand. "With all due respect, if this continues, the company will fall behind." "Then let it fall behind," Charles replied. "If racing ahead means leaving humanity behind, I don't want the lead." That night, alone in his apartment, Charles sat quietly with a cup of tea, something he had picked up from Maria. He looked out at the dark sky and thought about his past. Years ago, he had been a young, hungry developer with nothing but a dream. He had worked long hours, slept on couches, and risked everything to build his company. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped building for people and started building for numbers. And that's what Maria had changed. She didn't just make him feel guilt, she made him remember. A week later, Charles was invited to speak at a major tech conference. Normally, he would have talked about software, innovation, maybe new market, trends. But this time, he walked on stage in a plain jacket and jeans. He told the audience about Maria. He talked about how a humble waitress in a forgotten Lakute town had given him a truth he couldn't ignore. He told them that real progress wasn't just about speed and size, it was about meaning. And then, in front of thousands of listeners and cameras, he made a promise. For every new tech product we launch, we will include a version for small businesses, for the Marias of the world. We'll no longer build for the few, we will build for all. The crowd was quiet at first, then slowly, applause began to rise. Some stood. Some cheered. Others just watched in silence, unsure of how to react. Back at the diner, Maria watched the speech on a small TV in the kitchen. One of her coworkers nudged her. "He's talking about you," the woman said. Maria blushed. "I guess he is." Later that week, Maria received a letter by mail. It was handwritten, on fine paper. Inside, Charles had written, "Dear Maria, I wanted to say thank you once again. You saw something in me that I had forgotten existed. You reminded me of who I was meant to be. Enclosed is something that I hope will help you finally chase your own dreams. No strings, just belief. Charles." Inside the envelope was a scholarship certificate, full tuition, books, living allowance, everything she needed to go back to college. Maria stared at it, speechless. Her hands trembled a little as she held the paper. For years, she had put herself last. Now someone had finally put her first. Her sister cried when she saw it. "You deserve this," she whispered. Maria smiled through tears. "Maybe I do." She didn't leave the diner right away. She trained someone to take her place first. She helped the staff get used to the new technology. She made sure everything would run smoothly even after she was gone. And then finally, she packed her things and left for school with hope in her heart and purpose in her step. Charles didn't ask for updates. He didn't check in often. He wanted Maria to have her space. But every now and then, she'd send him a small note. Just a few lines. "First day of classes. Nervous but excited. Just passed my first exam. Think I'm finally good at something again. Helping a professor build a small business plan for students. Thought of Root Connect. Thank you." Every message was short, but every message filled Charles with pride. Meanwhile, Root Connect kept growing. More towns joined in. Thousands of small businesses were now part of the network. And Charles kept improving the platform, always remembering what Maria had said. Keep it simple. Keep it human. Some media outlets tried to turn the story into something dramatic. Billionaire changed by Waitress. Love story in a diner. But Charles didn't entertain those ideas. This wasn't a romance. This was a revolution of the heart. He didn't need headlines. He had already found something better. He had found his way back. The evening sky was filled with soft orange and pink colors as the sun started to go down behind the mountains. A quiet breeze moved through the small town, rustling the leaves on the trees and gently shaking the old sign outside Jack's Diner. Inside, the place was calm. It wasn't busy like usual, just a few regular customers sipping coffee and talking about their day. But something felt different that day. Something was about to happen. Maria stood near the counter, wiping it with a cloth like she had done thousands of times before. Her apron was still tied around her waist, and her hair was in the usual ponytail. But now, there was something new in her eyes ashine, a quiet confidence. She had been back in town for a short break from college. Life had changed in ways she never imagined. She had never thought someone like her would ever go back to school, let alone help design tools that were now being used by businesses across the country. As she looked around the diner, she smiled. It still smelled like pancakes and bacon. The walls still had the same photos of old customers and the jukebox still didn't work, and yet it all felt different now. The diner had grown to new screens showed orders. A simple app helped customers pay, and many locals said business had actually gotten better since Root Connect was installed. Suddenly, the bell above the door rang. Maria looked up and froze, but this time not from surprise. Her smile widened as Charles stepped inside. He wasn't wearing a suit, had on jeans, a flannel shirt, and simple sneakers. He looked more relaxed than she had ever seen him. His face showed the same strong features, but he had a peaceful look now. Like a man who had finally stopped running. They looked at each other for a few seconds. Then Maria walked around the counter. "Didn't expect to see you today," she said with a warm smile. "Didn't plan it," Charles said. "I was driving past and thought, why not stop?" She nodded. "Well, you're always welcome here." He laughed lightly. "Good to know." He took his usual seat by the window. The same booth he had sat in the first time they met. Maria followed him and sat across from him, just like old times. "How's college?" he asked. "Busy," she replied, "but I love it. I'm learning more than I thought possible. Sometimes it's hard, but every time I feel like giving up, I remember how far I've come." "You've come a long way," he said. She looked at him curiously. "And you? How's your empire?" He chuckled. "Different, but better. Root Connect is now in over 15,000 small businesses. We're helping farmers markets, family shops, even street vendors. And the team, well, we've built something we're proud of. For the first time in years, it feels like we're building. For people, not just numbers." "That's good to hear," Maria said softly. Charles paused for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small white envelope, placed it on the table and slid it toward her. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Open it," he said. She slowly tore it open and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a formal document with her name at the top. Her eyes widened. "Wait, ... is this?" "Yes," Charles smiled. "You're officially a partner in Root Connect. It's not just honorary. You'll have a share in the profits, your voice in decisions, and your name on the mission. You helped build this. You deserve to be part of it." Maria was speechless. She stared at the paper for a moment, then looked back at him. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You already said it," Charles replied. "That day, when you told me that chasing big wins can blind us, you lit a spark that changed everything." Maria felt her heart beat a little faster. She had never asked for anything. She had never expected anything. She just wanted to live a good life, do her job, and take care of the people she loved. But now her words had reached further than she ever thought possible. They sat in silence for a moment, both staring out the window at the quiet street. The sun was lower now, casting golden light on the trees and buildings. It was a peaceful evening, the kind that makes you stop and breathe deeply. "You know," Charles said after a while, "I've been to hundreds of meetings, stayed in the best hotels, signed deals worth billions, ... But nothing stayed with me like that afternoon in this diner. Maria looked at him gently. Maybe because that was the first time someone spoke to you, not your title. He smiled. Maybe. Or maybe it's because you were brave enough to tell the truth. She laughed lightly. It mattered more than you'll ever know, he said. Other customers had started noticing Charles now. Some whispered, few smiled, but no one interrupted. They all knew the story by now. Everyone in the town had heard how a waitress had changed a billionaire's heart and how that billionaire had returned, not with arrogance, but with respect. One older customer near the counter raised his coffee cup toward Charles. Good to see you back, son. Charles nodded with a warm smile. Good to be back. Maria looked around the diner. It's funny, she said. When I started working here, I thought this was the end of the road, just something I had to do to survive. I never imagined this place would be the start of something bigger. Charles leaned forward. Sometimes the biggest changes start in the smallest places. Outside, the last rays of sunlight slowly faded. Streetlights turned on, and the town became quieter. But inside the diner, the atmosphere was full of life, warm, hopeful, real. Maria stood up. Want some dinner? It's on the house, of course. Charles laughed. As long as it's not scrambled eggs again, she grinned. You're lucky we've improved the menu. She walked back toward the kitchen, and Charles watched her go. He wasn't thinking about deals or deadlines. He wasn't thinking about headlines or stocks. He was thinking about how a simple act of kindness, one quiet warning from a humble waitress, had led to everything changing. He realized something else too. Real success wasn't about being the richest. It wasn't about how many companies you owned or how fast you grew. Real success was being able to go back to a place like this, sit at a booth with nothing to prove, and know that you had made something good out of what you were given. When Maria returned with a plate of fresh pasta and garlic bread, smiled like a man who had finally found what he'd been searching for, not in the high towers of the city, but in the heart of a quiet town, in a diner with cracked tiles and a broken jukebox, and a friendship that began with honesty, and that was how everything changed. Not because someone planned it, not because someone demanded it, but because one person cared enough to speak and another cared enough to listen. The world kept turning. Businesses kept running. People kept living. But now, thanks to Maria and Charles, thousands of small businesses had hope. Thousands of people had tools to grow. And one simple truth had found its way back into the heart of a billionaire. Sometimes change doesn't need a loud voice. It just needs a true one. And Maria's voice, quiet and humble, had been more powerful than any shout. Charles took a bite of his food, smiled, and said, You were right, Maria. Looked at him, puzzled. About what? This place really does have the best coffee. They both laughed. And somewhere in that laughter, in that moment, was the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another one that no one could have written better.